The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And hello, welcome to Open, the show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world right to you. I'm Daren Jaime, and today we're going to update you on what's happening in and around our borough. Today is Wednesday, March 20th, and it's actually the first day of spring. Yes. Today is Wednesday, April the 3rd. Can you believe we're already in April? Well, yes, we are. Today is Wednesday, July the 3rd, of course, right before Independence Day. Today is Wednesday, August the 7th. Can you believe we're already in August? Well, you're watching Open, a live program bringing the Bronx and New York City straight to you. We also want to welcome our viewers on Manhattan Neighborhood Network, as Open is being broadcast simultaneously on MNN's channel. Now, you can stay connected to us on all social media platforms at BronxNet TV. And there you can find out all the latest that's going on. So stay tuned, because all this and much more is heading your way. Right now, we're officially open. And hello and welcome to Open. I'm your host, Daren Jaime. And guess what? Today is Wednesday, January 1st, 2020. So we got to tell everybody Happy New Year. And as we begin this journey into the new year, we're going to take a look back here on Open at some of the best episodes of 2019. Now, throughout the past year, we worked hard to keep our viewers informed with Bronx updates, the world of politics, finances, education, health, wellness, and so much more. And so during the year, we covered a lot of news on a local level, a lot of news on a national level with our Bronx updates. So we're going to take a look at some of the most important news that's defined 2019. Bronx man dies after jumping in front of the number 4 train with his daughter in his hands. The incident happened on Monday morning at the Kingsbridge station right here in our borough. 45-year-old Fernando Balbuena Flores jumped onto the tracks while holding his 5-year-old daughter and was hit by a southbound number 4 train. Medics pronounced Balbuena Flores dead at the scene. However, once the train stopped, a video of 2 Good Samaritans rushed to save the 5-year-old from under the train. Here's a clip from the incident.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Little my love, little my little. Little my little. Ay, Dios mío, Señor, gracias.
Amazing video. The 5-year-old was not harmed by the train and was taken to Jacoby Hospital to be treated for scratches. In other news, in local politics, Congressman Jose Serrano will not be seeking re-election in 2020. This comes after the representative of the 15th Congressional District announced his retirement, revealing that he has Parkinson's disease. In explaining his decision, Serrano says Parkinson's will eventually take a toll. Serrano is 75 years old and has been a member of the U.S. House of Representatives since 1990, making him the longest-serving Hispanic American in the House. Throughout his career, Congressman Serrano has worked on revitalizing the Bronx River, bringing billions of federal dollars to the Bronx, expanding access for the ballot to the ballot for language minorities, and increasing STEM for resources for minority students. Congressman Jose Serrano's retirement is sure to bring about a competitive race for the seat in the New York Democratic primaries. Of course, stay tuned as we'll bring you all the candidates right here on Bronx. Well, minimum wage increased to $15 an hour on Monday. The increase was passed as part of the 2016-2017 budget and was being raised in increments. Now, the wage increase means employees working for businesses with more than 10 employees will make at least $15 per hour. Smaller businesses employees will go up to $13.50 and are expected to make $15 by the year 2020. Across the rest of the state, the minimum wage is going up to $11.10. Governor Cuomo reminds workers to contact the wage theft hotline if you feel you have any questions at 1-888-4-NYS-DOL to report employers who are not complying with the new increase. The Bronx is topping the charts once again, and this time not in a good way. When it comes to crime in New York City, it's reported precincts in the Bronx have the slowest response time. Now, this fact comes according to the latest Independent Budget Office report. The report states the average response time to crime scenes in the borough in 2018 was nearly 2 minutes longer than the citywide average. The average dispatch times in the 12 Bronx police precincts was more than 5.6 minutes compared to a citywide average of 3.8 minutes. Now, the 44th and 48th precincts had the slowest times across the city with 8 minutes and 7.7 minutes respectively. The borough with the fastest average dispatch time was Staten Island, an average of 2.62 minutes. Well, New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo announced that New York is the first state in the nation to implement a ban on the sale of flavored electronic cigarettes and nicotine e-liquids. Governor Cuomo directed that state police and the Department of Health immediately partner together to ramp up enforcement efforts against retailers who sell to underage youth with the possibility of criminal penalties. He says, quote, New York is not waiting for the federal government to act, and by banning flavored e-cigarettes, we're safeguarding the public health and helping prevent countless young people from forming costly, unhealthy, and potentially deadly lifelong habits. 2019 was a groundbreaking year in the world of politics. It may have been difficult to keep up with the new laws and the policies and some issues affecting our community, but here on Open, we invited legal and political experts to break down these topics. So we're going to take a look back at the world of politics on Open.
And I knew about 20 years ago that the day Congressman Serrano decides to step down, it will be the mother of all successions. I mean, think about it. This is the Bronx. This is the South Bronx congressional seat. This is a seat that's historically been the poorest congressional seat in the country. You have tons of qualified, excited, ambitious politicians that are ready to go to Congress. Many of them who were taken aback last year with AOC's victory, beating the powerful Joe Crowley. Many of them now see themselves as a congressperson, perhaps senator, who knows, maybe president down the road.
Right.
You know, things happen when people like AOC and Donald Trump win. Everybody thinks they can do it. And now in the Bronx, we're fortunate to have some qualified people. You know, Councilman Diaz has set up a campaign account. Senior, that is.
Right.
So everybody's not
junior,
not
senior,
the borough
right.
president. You have Councilman Richie Torres has announced. You have, you know, a BronxNet guest regularly, Jonathan Ortiz has announced. Last night we just got word that Assemblyman Michael Blake is formally announcing his run for Congress. This is an exciting field. I was thinking about running, but then Councilman Diaz Sr. threw in his race, and I realized we're going to have to split the cabbie vote. We have to split the church vote, and then he has more of a BronxNet fan base than I do. So I had to step back.
So that's why we got you here. That's why we got you
But
here.
I think it's going to be exciting when you have Assemblyman Blake with the DNC and connections, and the former President Obama connections. He just ran for public advocate, and then you have the base that Councilman Diaz has. I think, remember, you're running against a guy who has buildings named after him, who has thousands of church congregants. This is going to be a real race in this primary. I want to see what's going to happen.
What made you decide you wanted to do this?
The main reason is the people. I have been a community worker, a community servant all my life. I did the right thing. I followed what my mom said, what my teacher said at PS30, at the Urban Assembly Bronx School for Law, Government and Justice. I got my degree. And with that degree, I have been able to achieve, I got an opportunity to work and help the community, right? But what ends up happening is that even with you having an education in the Bronx, you're still not making a livable wage. The rents are still rising. There's no affordable housing. Even if you did the right thing, you're paying as if you did them wrong.
When you look at District 15 right now, a very wide district, a lot of land to cover, but also a lot of issues. What do you find to be paramount in District 15 that really needs to be addressed?
The number one issue in the Bronx is affordable housing. The second issue after that, it's the student loan situation, which is the Bronx is #1 in student loan default. So, you might want to do the right thing. You might get that MSW, you might want to get that law degree, but that comes with a price attached, and we're not getting financial education in our schools. Financial education is, it's not there. It's just not there. Not only in the Bronx, but pretty much throughout the entire United States. I want people, when they see this election, don't just see what's happening in the Bronx. See what's happening across the United States. It's a federal election.
What was your premise in saying, listen, I want to do this?
Well, to be honest with you, I was actually thinking about it before he even retired.
Okay.
Yeah. And for me, I do work in the community, in the grassroots level. I'm in the NYCHA facility, running a community center. I said, if I want to accomplish my vision and my goals, I cannot do so in the capacity that I'm at right now. And I saw many gaps in this district that is the poorest congressional district, lowest education. 92% of people living in this district are renting their units, no home ownership, no equity. And I'm really, really worried about our future of our children. And that's what's at stake right now.
Mm-hmm. And so when you look at the district overall, talk to me about what do you think is the most paramount?
Well, it's collectively, it comes down to poverty. Poverty is what is our issues. Under poverty is crime, low education, unaffordable housing, and how do we tackle that? And I do it in the educational route. I'm a community educator. When I say community educator, the untraditional route. I'm not in the DOE schools. I'm at a facility where I'm able to create my own programs and curriculum, and I'm able to tackle certain issues that the institutional, like DOE and charters and privates, aren't able to tackle.
We were able to secure another $100 million on top of the $450 that's finally going to be released for public housing. Now, why is it so important? When we continue to see that people are wondering why is it easier to get unleaded gas than lead-free paint in their homes, something has to change. And the lack of federal investment over decades is the reason. And so, number one, there has to be a very clear focus on public housing. You should not have a party planner and Lynn Patton, the one overseeing NYCHA for the regional efforts, continuing that way. Number two, we have to focus on affordable housing in the macro. Area median income, which determines affordability, that comes from the federal aspect. And I feel very clearly you should have neighborhood-based income. We should understand what's going on locally in our communities. Westchester, Rockland, others should not impact the South Bronx. But lastly, this is also about the broader aspect around the economics of it. And too often we're wondering how we're going to pay the bills in our communities. This reason I said there should be universal basic income. There should be a focus on skills. There should be a focus on wages. Because we understand if you can't pay for your home and you don't have a safe home, nothing else feels that it matters. My family understands this. My family's from Jamaica. I talk about this often. My mom was homeless in Jamaica. We sold dinners to pay rent in the Bronx. I know this firsthand. I grew up in Creston and Burnside. And too often, people are not getting the help. And last week was another reminder of that. We should not have transformers blowing out at Jackson houses. Right. You should not have people wondering if they're going to have cool temperatures in their homes. And that is because you need to have someone who understands this and focus on this. And there is no one in this race that has done more around housing and public housing the way I have. And it's one of the main reasons I'm asking for people to vote for us. They can see that vision of what we're laying out on our website, blakeforcongress.nyc.
Most of the members who have joined the race, tell us what sets you apart and what you are planning to do to improve housing.
Well, I have been an advocate for affordable housing from the moment I entered public office. And not only have I studied the issues in depth, but I've lived. I grew up in public housing right across the street from Trump Golf Course.
Yeah, that must be very interesting now to go back and see that.
I tell people I've been smelling the stench of Donald Trump well before he became president, but I was living in conditions of mold and mildew and lead with no reliable heat and hot water. And right across the street, as I was living in those conditions, the city was spending more than $100 million on a golf course for Donald Trump. And I remember asking myself at the time, how could it be that we're investing more in a gilded, gated golf course for Donald Trump than in the homes of struggling New Yorkers? And so that's what inspired me first to be a housing organizer and then run for the city council. And for 6 years, I've been the leading advocate for public housing in the city of New York. The South Bronx, which is said to be the poorest in the country, has one of the largest concentrations of public housing, which has been so savagely starved of funding at every level of government that it has $32 billion worth of capital needs. In the private housing sector, you have more than half the residents in a neighborhood like Fordham pay more than half their income toward their rent. And that's before you factor in the cost of healthcare, prescription drugs, food, transportation. So for everyday New Yorkers, our city is becoming increasingly unlivable. You know, we've heard about the term the working poor. We now have the working homeless, right? Half of the people in our shelter system are working people, right? The promise of the American dream is that if you abide by the law and you play by the rules, you will have a fighting chance at a decent life. That is no longer true. And so we need a member of Congress who's going to restore the promise of the American dream.
Let me just say, you know, we are in a very fragile moment in our democracy. And I think obviously looking at issues locally are critically important. And what can we do at the national level to push back, right? We have an administration that is extremely hostile to communities of color. It is hostile to low-income communities. And so we are in the bullseye, right, of policies that this administration is putting forward that are detrimental. When you talk about reduction, there's now news that they want to reduce further SNAP benefits, which is nutritional assistance for families and for individuals. When you talk about the assault on public housing, of which we have the most in the country, and taking away resources that are vital to improving the quality of life of those who live in public housing. We shouldn't be eliminating public housing. We shouldn't be trying to diminish the resources. We should be talking about creating more public housing. We have to fight for the things that are basic and which should be a priority in this country. Affordable housing. When we talk about health care, we should be, I support Medicare for all. These are critically important to the lives of Bronxites and for those residents in the 15th Congressional District. So I am committed to continuing to be an advocate at a local level, but really taking the fight at the national level to an administration, again, that has been hostile and is hostile to people like me, to those that I've represented, to those who are my family and neighbors and friends. And so that is what this is about that we are in a fragile moment in time and that we need to take this fight.
And a lot of the stress and anxiety for our moms and our fathers, that could bring their stress down so they don't have to go to the doctors too often, which is why I believe in the overall health care. Give people the opportunity to take that stress. They don't have to stay at a job because of their benefits. They could pick any job they want, and they know they'll be covered from health reasons. I also believe in the 4-day work week, which a lot of research has been on that. Same benefits, childcare will be covered, paid leave will attribute to lower stress and anxiety. It's been proven productivity will still be high. It'll lower emissions, it'll lower overhead for the companies. And it's proven that when they go back to work, they're more happy.
I mean, it's time, right? We have mayoral control of their schools, so why not have control of the MTA, our own subway systems, our own buses? You know, there's so much lost with this MTA board and so much state control over it that at the end, we're not listening to the people of the city. And it's not fair. It's not in our hands. The decision making is left to the state, and it's not fair. They're not heavily involved. They're not taking the trains like we do here in the city. And it's forcing a lot of people to go and take Ubers, and we're spending more money on Ubers, on Lyft, and all those for hire vehicles, when in reality, give us a better system. Right. Because we actually can control the budget and we can actually make real substantial changes. I mean, look at what happened in the 2nd Avenue line, and it's taken forever. Right? So actually, let's put forth 2 things, right? We really need to make sure that we're making it easier for construction, right? Right now, construction takes forever. We're not holding those developers accountable, right? When you have these contractors out there and then they make a mess, you can't take out the contract. You can't stop the contract immediately. And that's what holds us back from construction, because the state controls that. So why don't we just give it back to the city to control the construction of each line, right? I mean, like, it's just taken too long for just one line. And when we can invest those funds into actually making it easier for folks and actually cleaning the tracks and hiring more folks to run the train system.
Across New York City, the closing of Rikers Island, and I know you are dead set in favor of that.
Absolutely. You know, as a formerly incarcerated man, I'm born and raised in the Bronx. I live in the Bronx now. I come from Soundview. There was one point in my life where I thought jail and prison was my only option. That's what I saw in Soundview. And when I went to prison, my last incarceration, I went to school, got my GED, went to college, graduated, and I realized that my circumstance was just my circumstances. There's reality of the environment that I lived in, but that prison didn't have to be my only option, that I can change my life. And Fortune Society was the organization that gave me an opportunity and to change my life. And I now know that incarceration is not the way to safer community, healthier communities. That's the way that we diminish our communities. And so I stand tall and I stand proud to say we need to close Rikers Island, we need to go to a smaller system, and we need to reinvest those resources back into the communities that are hardest hit.
So we know that closing Rikers Island is one thing that's being talked about, but then also there's the talk about borough-based jails, right? And having one here in the borough. How do you feel about having borough-based jails?
Well, I think if the option is reducing the number of beds we have, and that option includes building in the borough-based facilities, I think that's a way to go for two reasons. One is that by having borough-based facilities, family members who have people who are incarcerated could easily access their family members. Right now, it takes almost a whole day to travel out to Rikers Island, which is isolated, far away from public oversight and public scrutiny, to visit for 1 hour. By having borough-based jails, lawyers can get to see their clients. Family members can get to see their loved ones.
The expungement piece was the bill that I was able to get passed in this past legislative session. So the biggest piece about expungement is this: people's lives have been ruined by the possession of cannabis. Whatever you think about it may be, it has limited people's access to housing. It has limited people's access to employment, to education. So even if we could not ultimately get the adult use legalization, we got expungement, and that's a huge victory for our communities. And any legalization, in my opinion, has to come with significant reinvestment in impacted communities.
When we talk about, David and I talked about legislation, getting it passed, right? It's really a huge mountainous move up in Albany. How do you see this playing out? How quickly do we see this playing out?
It's been a huge culture change to change people's minds about what they think about cannabis. It has been derided for so many years socially. It's been a social pariah, but now people are starting to look at the benefits of medical marijuana. We have the medical marijuana program, and now people are looking at other states. Illinois was the first state to pass it legislatively this past year, so now they've gone away from the referendum, and that legislature stood up and they were able to pass it in their own legislation, and the governor signed the bill. So hopefully in New York we can get that done this legislative session.
The question is, what does that mean in terms of you're using marijuana throughout New York City, and how does that impact other areas of the law? And that's really what I want to talk about today.
So use can still get you criminal penalties.
Well, yeah, can still get you criminal penalties. The penalties are much less, and if you have higher levels that you've used in the past, you can have your record expunged so that it won't come up on different credit checks and on different employment applications. But it is still a crime. There are only 11 states that have made it not a crime, and New York is not one of them yet. We don't have the votes at this point. Will we have the votes in 6 months to a year? Maybe, but right now it's still considered to be a crime. Now, medical marijuana is legal. So if you have a prescription in New York, that's fine, and we're one of 33 states that have allowed that. But the question is, if it's still not legal, and even though it's not considered to be a high-level offense, how does it impact you in other ways? Well, I'll give you an example. You go for a job interview, and they do a drug test, and it comes up that you have some marijuana in your system, and you don't have any prescription for medical marijuana. Well, it's still considered to be a crime. Your employer can still not hire you. But what are the responsibilities of the employer in terms of turning you in or letting everybody know? No one's quite sure. The vehicle and traffic law, driving, lists drugs as things that will impact your ability to drive a car. Is it considered to be a drug? Well, right now it is considered to be a drug. If it's made legal in 6 months to a year, is it not considered to be a drug anymore? That affects your ability to drive a car. All still up in the air. This is very interesting, and some of the guests on the show last night were discussing this. You can go into the state Supreme Court with a minimum amount of marijuana in your pocket and just be really given a fine for that, and yet you could walk 3 blocks down into the federal courthouse and you could be arrested. So, because that's in federal, it is a crime with higher levels of penalties. So, the issues that New Yorkers want to know right now is, well, what happens if I'm walking outside and I'm smoking marijuana as opposed to I'm in my apartment on my couch smoking? Same thing.
Still going to be the same penalty.
Same penalty.
As you see, a lot was discussed during 2019. Well, we're taking a quick break, but we'll be back with more of the Best of Open 2019 as we start the new year here on Open.
It's time to get serious about your future. At Bronx Community College, you can earn an Associate of Applied Science degree and become a medical laboratory technician in as little as 2 years. Earn an average salary of over $50,000 a year in one of the most rewarding careers in medicine. All you need is a high school diploma or equivalent to get started. Those who qualify can get tuition covered by grants and scholarships, so why wait? For program details, contact Bronx Community College today.
And we're back here with the best of Open. When it comes to breakthroughs in healthcare, diagnosis, treatments, prevention, awareness, and medical advice, we invited some of the most knowledgeable experts in their respective fields to give our viewers accurate information. We'll take a look at some of the best right now.
I think really the important thing to know is that women with breast cancer affects a large number of women, 1 in 9, that Black women tend to have a higher risk of dying of breast cancer. And that is in part because of disparities in care and in part because they tend to have a more aggressive form of breast cancer called triple negative breast cancer. And so because of that, screening for breast cancer is really, really important because early detection saves lives. So the important thing to know about breast cancer is that the vast majority of women with breast cancer are cured. Almost 90% of women with breast cancer are cured. And that the earlier that breast cancer is caught, the more likely that breast cancer is to be cured. So early diagnosis saves lives, and of course there's a huge amount of fear associated with a breast cancer diagnosis or with any kind of cancer diagnosis, but we have very, very effective treatments for both breast and cervical cancer, and that the majority of women with breast and cervical cancer are cured of their disease.
It's really important for women to have their health care, and we recommend that they come annually. I think that certainly in the reproductive ages, like between 21 and 45, oftentimes the gynecologist or Women's Health Services is the primary care for women. And so taking the whole gamut of all their issues, their menstrual health, their sexual health, their risk for disease like sexually transmitted infections, and family planning services, deciding when you want to have a child, child spacing, and if you don't want to have children at all.
Right. And so I think when sometimes when people hear about the word gynecologist, it's only related to one area, right? But then it's so multifaceted.
Right. I mean, I prefer actually calling it Women's Health Services because I really think we take care of the whole woman, and the woman is taking care of the whole family. So it's really important that she's strong and healthy for the rest of her family.
Sure. So I always encourage something that is sustainable when we take on new dietary changes. I think a lot of people are looking for crash diets and things that can help get the weight off fast. But what we're really looking for is something that is small, but that changes your life and that you can maintain for a lifetime.
Even though this problem affects over 8 million people, nobody knows what it is. And so early diagnosis is important. So peripheral arterial disease is really simply blockages in the arteries that feed the circulation to the legs. Those blockages are caused by atherosclerotic disease or plaque. It's the same type of buildup that causes heart attacks in the heart. That's the same type of problem. When it's in the legs, it's called peripheral arterial disease.
So thyroid disease is any disorder that's going to affect the thyroid gland. So a lot of patients have thyroid nodules, very prevalent. Up to 65% of the population will have at least one thyroid nodule. You can have hyperfunctioning or hypofunctioning of the thyroid gland, where the thyroid is not producing the right amount of thyroid hormone that the body needs, and that's separate from the presence of thyroid nodules. And then you can have thyroid cancer, and so we treat all of those thyroid diseases that can affect our patients.
Sure, you bring up a great point. It is part of the differential where we think about stroke and we think about Bell's palsy. It's a weakness of the seventh nerve, which is the facial nerve, which can affect our ability to close our eyes and move our mouth. So it can present like a stroke, and it is one of the warning signs, facial weakness of a stroke, that we try to remind people of. But Bell's palsy is actually not a central phenomenon. It's actually a process that affects our peripheral nerves. It's a common, like what we call mononeuropathy of the facial nerve. And commonly you can have weakness of the facial muscles, which can cause some drooling, some difficulty with speech, which actually can mimic a stroke.
Right. So what exactly causes Bell's palsy?
So there's a couple of theories behind it. It really is inflammation of the nerve, of the seventh nerve as well. There are some theories that it could be from the herpes virus or some of the zoster viruses, but it really is just a main inflammation of the nerve, of the seventh nerve.
So what are some of the warning signs? What are some of the things that we could be looking out for with our loved ones and our friends and family so we can kind of like pinpoint if they're in that unhealthy state?
Yeah. So there are verbal and nonverbal warning signs. A person can say, I want to die, or my life is just not worth living, or I can't deal with my life right now, or I just give up. One of the number one indicator for suicide is hopelessness. Also isolating. A person may stop going to church or stop going to their community center or stop attending family or social events or stop answering the telephone. Or also a person may start drinking alcohol more frequently, and they're usually a social drinker, and now they're drinking alone or using drugs. Or also a person may, their eating or sleeping behaviors may change. They may be sleeping too much or just not able to even get out of bed to go to their appointments. Or also not eating. Right. Or overeating. And also risky behaviors like maybe walking into traffic or leaning over a subway platform edge or driving recklessly or under the influence. So these are signs that we should all look for.
Over the past year, we've kept you informed on new and exciting educational opportunities as well as some traditional programs. We're going to take a look back at what we shared over the past year. So that, you know, the people are going to say to me, is this really true? You got somebody who's got a university, tuition free, and people attending school.
Well, it is. We are online, fully accredited, and tuition free. We are not free. We ask the students to pay $100 per each, and of course assessment, but which turn to be $4,000 for a full BA degree, or $2,000 for associate degree, over as many years as it takes them to study. So we are ultra low cost university, and it is because we believe that higher education should be a basic right for everyone. And so many people cannot afford it, and it's a shame. So we decided to build a university that will be affordable to anyone.
Well, Oliver Scholars is a program that throughout the city we try to find high achieving, hardworking 7th grade students. And we, over the course of 14 months, put them through a program that prepares them and also places them in some of the top independent schools in the city and across the Northeast. And sometimes in California as well. We have some new exciting partnerships with some boarding schools in California in the last 2 years.
So it all starts with our nominations, and so anyone can nominate. It can be a family, it can be a school. It all takes place online, and the nomination just identifies the student, what school they go to, and then from there we invite them to an open house so they learn more about the program before they fully apply. Once they apply, we'll test the students, and from there we'll interview them. That's the final part of our phase, and we actually just wrapped up our interview weekend this past weekend.
Jumpstart for a Day, we just pretty much bring the magic of the classroom out into the community. So what we do is our college volunteers who we work with that are typically in the classroom delivering the curriculum, put together all of the materials, and we package up books to give away, and then we bring it out into the community. So we invite families to come out and participate in literacy activities, read alouds, and then we give away 200 backpacks filled with free books and activities, and we also invite partner organizations that focus on early education to also come out and table and give out resources to families.
Well, Blaze Academy is a charter school that is focused on the South Bronx. We focus on having a rigorous curriculum partnered with high-level instruction from passionate teachers to push our students to be successful in high school, college, and the world beyond. We definitely believe in also building intrinsic and extrinsic motivators for our students, which is where that culture piece comes in.
Blaze has this partnership with BronxNet, and you've got two of our very own finest back there. And I'll start with Will. So talk about the project and what you guys did in working with Blaze.
Well, it was an interesting project because when they first presented to me the offer, I took it because I love kids, but here's the issue. I didn't have a curriculum. I
Right.
didn't know what I was going to do, right? So my curriculum was to do it what the kids wanted to do along with some of the ideas that I had. So we went out and we interviewed the other electives. We went out, we did a slime video with our last trimester class. We did ENN, which was their own news network at the beginning, which was they wanted to do a school calendar, but in the form of morning news, similar to what you do. So we did that. We interviewed Mr. Wicks when he had his basketball with the boys, I believe. Co-ed, yeah. We did that. We did an interview with Ms. Rojas' apprenticeship program, which was a really cool experience. The kids learned how to do some work in school. We did dance. We did arts. We did
trimester showcase.
Yeah, trimester showcase. And then the best part was when we filmed the graduation.
A lot of Bronx charter school leaders are doing great work, so I'm here to represent.
That's good. Well, you're going to represent well today. So talk to us about these numbers, because recently released statistics show that Bronx charter schools are doing well.
Yeah, it's a really incredible thing. So this past year, for next year, 25,000 families in the Bronx alone applied to only about 9,500 available seats in charter schools. So about 15,000 families are on a wait list simply because they want a great option for their child. Why? Well, the results that just came out help to explain it. At our boys' school, so we run a network of all boys and all girls schools, nearly 70% of the boys passed the math exam. That was 40 percentage points higher than other kids in the district. And it's emblematic of the performance of charter schools across the Bronx. So in ELA and math, I think we're equal to something about 15 or 12 percentage points higher than the state, the city, far higher than the district. And so the essence is we want to ensure that parents have the power to choose a great tuition-free option for their kids. And I think the test scores help to demonstrate why they should have that choice.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more of the Best of Open 2019.
Programming for and about the Bronx is what BronxNet is all about.
We are BronxNet!
And we are back. Well, over the course of the past year, Open has opened its door literally to several amazing co-hosts who have presented a unique engagement with our guests and you, the viewer. We're going to take a look at that right now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Veronica Guitique.
I'm Sanji Lopez. I'm Darissa White.
And you're now watching Open.
What inspired me was Junior's murder. I physically went out there and I interacted with a lot of youth during that time. And at that point, I realized that a lot of murders were occurring in the Bronx due to gun, gang, and street violence. So I decided to hold a...
Now, for those who, I'm sure everybody in the
Yes.
Bronx pretty much knows who's Junior, but
Yes.
for those who don't,
Right.
Junior was a young man who was brutally killed by a group of young men who came out, and it was actually a mistaken identity, and he was killed at a local bodega. And we've been covering this story, and it's just very sad. So we're very happy when individuals like yourself are taking it upon themselves to
Right.
start organizations like this to get the guns off the street.
Correct. So in the midst of doing that, I realized, speaking to his friends, that it was weighing heavy on them. So I wanted to just create a day where we come out and we honor all kids that were lost to gun, gang, and street violence. It's a uncomfortable conversation for many, but I think it's needed, and it's definitely something that we need to bring awareness to, that gangs do run the streets in the Bronx, and they are visibly within our teens. So I'm just here to give the voice to the ones that are lost and to tell the teens that gangs are not the way, street violence is not the way, any form of violence is not the way.
We've expanded the definition of race. So essentially we've always had racial protections, not always, but we have racial protections in both our human rights law and our education law. Through this bill, we expanded the definition to capture natural hairstyles and hairstyles commonly associated with your ethnic traits. So thereby we're capturing braids, knots, puffs, and things dreadlocks. All of the hairstyles that are commonly associated with Black people and that are oftentimes outside the scope of some of our narrowly prescribed dress and or work.
Made sense as the son and grandson of Black women and the father of Black daughters. My daughters are my inspiration for many things. And thinking about them and how they like to wear their hair out, when they wear their hair out, my wife puts it out, and they call it their curlies, right? and I would be saddened beyond belief if somebody decided one day that Giada and Karina, my daughter's names, that they could not work or they could be discriminated against in school or in a workplace simply because of the hair, the style that they choose to wear, having no bearing on their abilities, having no bearing on who they are as people. So people look at us as people of color. They look at us as Black people, specifically Black women. And they decide that this is a value judgment that I'm going to make upon you the second I see you. I haven't spoken to you, I don't know you, but because you have your hair in a certain way, I'm going to think this about you. And that's unacceptable. And I'm glad Tremaine brought this to me, and I'm really excited that we have this in New York State now.
So NYC shut it down. We came together organically in 2015 after Mike Brown, Makai Gurley, and Eric Garner were murdered by police, and there was no justice served. We marched through the streets, and then we formed this group, and we decided that we were going to highlight all of the people that have been murdered by police, and there has been no justice served. And we came up with People's Monday, where every Monday for 4 years straight, we highlighted a different victim of police brutality and spoke the facts of that case. And we never ran out of names. And there was no threat of us running out of names. We burnt out. It was traumatizing to have that many names and those many facts in our heads. So we switched models. While we were doing People's Mondays, we were always doing food serves and clothing drives and other political education like cop watch trainings and know your rights trainings. But People's Monday got to be very traumatic for us mentally and emotionally. So from there, we moved on to food serves. But during People's Monday,
like a comfort for the soul.
Yeah, for sure. And helping the community and just letting them know and getting them involved was very important to us. And we recognized that a lot of folks felt the same way. They just didn't know how to name it or where to channel the energy, or that it was actually political. So we have been doing cop watch trainings, food serves, like I said, and we are holding a march tonight for Eric Garner.
The commission is a permanent city agency. We were established, as you said, in 2015 to work with all city agencies to ensure that we develop as a city, and we develop and implement and sustain gender equitable policies and practices. Our goal is that every single New Yorker, regardless of gender identity, gender expression, or background, will have the opportunity to do at least 4 things. 1 is live economically secure lives. 2, to have access to quality and affordable health care. 3, to have full autonomy over their reproductive lives. And finally, 4, to live free from violence in our homes, in our communities, and at our workplaces. And so we work together across city agencies, and we also work with international bodies and with the for-profit sector to achieve these goals.
And I mean, New York, we're so lucky, right? We have arts and culture all over the city in every borough, but it gets very little funding. Right? One of the pushes we have done is to say that there should be 1% of the city budget should be for culture, right? It's so much a part of our life. It brings in so much for the city, brings in tourism and dollars, et cetera. But we are at about 0.26%. of the city city budget funding culture. So there's a long way to go. But we have been very happy in the last few years. They have been increasing the funding for the Department of Cultural Affairs, and more places are getting money. In fact, we did the city did a cultural plan for the city, right? They did a whole bunch of outreach and they made a cultural plan for how it should grow. Right. And now this year, they're talking about cutting funding. So it's exactly the wrong time to be cutting funding, because one of the real strong points of the cultural plan is that there should be more funding for culture in every borough, in every neighborhood. So it's not all centered in Manhattan, so that it's dispersed across the 5 boroughs of the city, which is exactly what we should be doing. So we hope very much that the City Council will push back against the mayor and say, no, there shouldn't be any cuts to cultural funding. All we're asking really is that we be kept at 2019 levels, when in fact what we need is an increase. But if we can just stay steady, that'll be great.
Yes, well, I love science fiction. I love history, especially African history, Greek mythology, Egyptian mythology. There's a lot of themes that seem to reoccur through all of these stories, and I thought it would be an excellent way to incorporate that into a story by writing about a 13-year-old named Danny Patton who wants to be the world's greatest inventor, just like his father. The problem is he's 13, and a lot of times his curiosity leads him into dark places in search of shadows. And the book is pretty much a metaphor for doing what you need to do in order to fulfill your goals, but realizing the consequences and the pitfalls that can happen in pursuit of your dreams, and how to always find the light at the other side. So it's just a classic story of good versus evil.
Initially, I was thinking back to when I was a teen, and how I was compelled and just gravitated to this tale of Rosa Parks and her bravery and being so courageous during that stand and during the civil rights movement. And it kind of resonated with me as I got older as well, because, me working with all boys, they don't actually see females in that light. So I decided to, just think about Rosa Parks in terms of what she did for the civil rights movement, and try to make her into this, take this feminist type of stand and just make her into a superhero. And not only boys seeing that, but just girls and just being gravitated to that story. But I wanted it for boys to see that in that light, because we're just, being that I teach all boys, I want them to see that from that light, yeah.
Yes. Now tell us a little bit about this, and why is this important? Why is this organization important right now?
WOCPSCN importance and impact is because we're able to combine business thought with community design. And the purpose behind that, because to empower a community needs economic sustainability. That level of sustainability can come from the development and understanding of how to create it. We have these nuances in our community that sometimes get overlooked by large businesses. We have, and we provide opportunity for those collaborative efforts to come forward, bringing together corporate with community to create levels of community solidarity.
And the name is quite interesting, because the acronyms are very long.
Yes.
Why name it that?
Actually, the organization started on LinkedIn in 2009. Women of Concerned Professionals, because we were a group of women that were concerned about what was happening in our society and in community. Strategic Conscious Networking, because we want to consciously think about what we do. So nothing is done arbitrarily, but is thought through from the construct of what the results are to come years from now. Not from now, but for futuristic plans.
Yeah, so we're hosting an event tomorrow, actually, at the Banknote Building, 1231 Lafayette Avenue, and it's called Young, Black, and Burnt Out. And so it's an event for Black, Indigenous people of color to talk about some of the harm that we experience in the workplace that's specific to us, talking about like some of the policies and practices that a lot of these workspaces have that are supposed to be investing in us, but they don't, and also to really talk about what does it look like to have a workspace that centers our healing, that pays us well, that centers our growth, and how we can really imagine that together. I would also say that for many of us, we're put into positions without really folks like investing in our growth. And so, you know, sometimes we're put into like director positions or managerial positions, and without like effective supervision, without like, you know, having supervisors who are really invested in like our personal and professional development, we often are put in positions, and then when we don't do right, we're kind of kicked out, right? And so like we think that it's really oppressive to put people of color in positions where we're not adequately trained to do that, and then like fire us, right? Because a lot of stress comes with that, a lot of like imposter syndrome comes with that, where we already feel like we're not good enough, and we're already working in spaces that were not created by us. Most of the time, the people on top don't look like us, and so you know, when we're not invested in, like that's really harmful to us.
Right.
The community has become more involved in the Bronx throughout the year of 2019. From opening their businesses to writing their own books, our guests have offered a variety of services to people of all ages. We're going to highlight some of the programs that we discussed and some very special guests here on Open.
So we are a subscription service. We style accessories and jewelry for women or men. But in many cases, some people are not sure how to match their earring and their bracelet and necklace, so we do it for you. And we send it to you each month. Now, the special part about it is that each subscription is based off of a Virago woman, a very strong woman, iconic woman at that. So that's our educational component to not only educating everyone on these particular women, but what they do and what makes them iconic about their fashion. So we have such as a Cardi B-inspired collection, a Beyonce-inspired subscription, as well as a Michelle Obama-inspired collection. So this is what you're seeing now, and we never match our pieces, we coordinate them.
So to put this all together, how long did it take you to really come up with the concept of business and moving it forward to where you are today?
Gosh, you know, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. I had a very, very high-powered career at the time, and, you know, I just realized that there was something a little different that I wanted and needed, and it really spoke to me. And I would love to say that this was a concept at the time, but it wasn't. I just knew I needed to do something different. So I left my job, and I was just like, oh my God, what do I do? And I waited, and finally this sort of came together for me. I knew I wanted to tie a mission to the business. I knew I wanted to be able to help other women learn about these iconic women who are in politics, who are moving mountains with their talent and their visions. So why not express that in jewelry?
A lot of men, you know, they trying to find their purpose. They're trying to see what things they can do in life. And I really believe that it's going to be something special to get men together, to connect with one another, and to help each other find our paths in life.
So you're gathering men together. You're going to talk about these real sensitive issues. Are men really, you know, people say men don't always talk about the issues, you know, we hold stuff in. Are you finding that men are more now willing to talk about these things?
Yes, and I'm here to change that notion. Men are trying to make it in life, they're trying to succeed, and they're trying to do what's right, but I believe that if they can have a place like this where they can be able to talk with one another, share their feelings, have activities, and just be able to be around people that's like-minded, it can help them to fulfill their purpose. The goal is to just be able to touch other people's lives and help them to know about God and who God is in their life, and trying to bless them with different things that they can take with them for the rest of their life. And the goal is not only to do that, but once you receive that, what are you going to do with that? You're going to give it to other people, and to not only meet people in church, but meet them at their point of need. So that can be when you're outside, whether you're at, you know, colleges, and whether you're at work, you know, to touch people's lives no matter where you're at.
Okay, so I formed Chat and True back in October 2016. It was in my living room. It came out of pillow talk with my ex-boyfriend. We would discuss different topics that affect relationships and why more of us are not married or in thriving relationships and committed relationships. So we were like, you know what, we want to get our friends in on a conversation, our friends and family. So we got everybody together like a normal, you know, gathering with food and drinks, which is why I called it Chat and True. And we just started discussing topics that affect relationships, from sex on first date to economics, women making more money than men, and it became really heated. We wanted to see the different perspectives between the men and women.
And I can imagine those conversations being heated. And after those conversations become heated, then what?
A lot of people get educated. Having different perspectives is very important, and having a crowd to hear those perspectives is equally as important, because we feel like having these discussions amongst individuals or a small group of friends isn't enough. Tackling very important topics about things that either are systemic in our society or, just important to make your relationship work is important for other people to hear, because there may be someone who shows up that doesn't speak. There may be someone who's there for the first time, and they always have something to take away from every event.
Right.
Absolutely. So, Lady Bosses, we're a women empowerment movement. We started back in 2016, and we're all from the Bronx. So, our idea behind it is to create a platform for the youth and for our community to allow them to bring out self-success, which is living a boss lifestyle. And we're also inspirational speakers for the youth.
So when you talk about a boss lifestyle, what's a boss lifestyle? What's a boss lifestyle?
Basically, living a lifestyle where you're doing what you want to do, You don't have to live the lifestyle that people assume, just getting up, going to school, going to work, and having to do those things. We want people to be able to do what is it that they really want to do. So finding the time to live that lifestyle. So for me, it was almost about recreating yourself.
Right. So for all of us, also when we say like being a boss, living a boss lifestyle, it's not so much about being the boss or telling you do this, you do that. No, it's about being the boss of you, taking control of you, that self-development, building your self-skills to become a better you. So you're your own boss.
So I was really shocked that they even wanted to film us doing Cop Watch. I was really, really happy about that. It's controversial for some reason what we do. So the fact that we were given this platform, I think, is a testament to the times that we're in right now.
And there is some controversy to it. Let's just be honest. I mean, you're out there filming police, you're filming things that are going on. A lot of people feel like, police shouldn't be filmed, or it shouldn't be that intense. Let them do their job. And you say what?
Yeah, listen, man. We know that police is out there doing what so-called what their job is, but we also know that police, especially in community of color, is being very aggressive when they detain or stop somebody or question somebody in the community of color. And we want to make sure that we show the other side that people are afraid to talk, the other side that people has not seen, and we want to bring that to the surface, and we want to make sure that people see that there is another side of policing that takes place in community of color that is different than the policing that takes place in a white community, and we want to show that difference.
Well, that's all for our look back at the year 2019. Now, as always, if you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the recablecast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimus Channel 67, Verizon Files Channel 33, or anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. For all of us here on the set of Open, we look forward to continuing keeping you informed as we begin this new decade. I'm your host, Daren Jaime. Make sure to keep this channel wide open, saying take care and God bless.